like a normal novel. When you write that way, you don't have to balance two perspectives pacing. Balancing two perspectives pacing actually increases the difficulty of a book quite a bit, because you don't want to have lulls where 3 or 4 chapters of characters doing the same thing in their respective plot lines happens. You can do it with 2, and you can contrast pretty well with 2. But once you have 3, if you hit like characters hitting the same kind of emotional beats, 3 chapters worth, 3 different characters, it gets tedious. You feel a monotony to that. And that's not an influence of how strong each of their individual stories are. Each of their individual stories could be really strong, but suddenly, because they hit, it's like a strange lull in conversation, everything becomes noticeable and whatnot. And so you have this added complexity of making sure that you are doing different things in different stories that create a pacing momentum rather than a pacing speed bump. And that just, the more of that you do, the more complicated and difficult a book gets to write and revise. And so these wrote more like Skyward 1, right? Or Mistborn 1. Even though Mistborn 1 had multiple viewpoints, the fact that I wasn't doing this and having to juggle taking a character arc from a previous book and expanding upon it in a way that felt natural. Like expanding on a character arc is always harder than writing a new character with a character arc, because you don't want that character to, again, hit the same beats they hit before. You want them to grow, but you also don't want to ignore what's happened before with them. And so these sorts of things are faster writes. And that, I don't think, has a dramatic influence on the quality comparison. I think single viewpoint books can be just as enjoyable. Like some of the best books I've read recently are single viewpoint books. But it does mean that the complexity of interweaving viewpoints goes down, and the books just get faster to write. And so that's one of the reasons I could do these, rather than doing like sequels to things that people are expecting and anticipating.
I see that you're almost done with that stack. It is
Yes.
7:50, or 7:52. I'm too used to doing this at night. 2:52. Did you want to keep answering questions?
Let's do one more question and one more stack.
One
Can
more
you just
stack?
bring me one more stack? You don't have to get these ones out of the way, because, yeah, we'll just do one more question. So like a couple more minutes.
Cool.
My son Oliver, who was 7 at the time, I believe, might have been 8, drew a picture of a robot frog and gave it to me. His name was Robog, and it was a really cute picture. And so I hung it up on my mirror in the bathroom and looked at it for months and months and months as I was, brushing my teeth or shaving. I'm like, there's Robog. What's Robog's story? And eventually I sat down and I wrote out a little bit of Robog's story. Actually, the kid who owned Robog as a toy. But, Robog comes to life because that's the type of story this is. And then I read it to Oliver and to Dallin, and they were just enamored with this idea that something they had drawn had inspired a story. And so they went and they just did concept art, just after tons of concept art, and gave it to me and like, all right, incorporate this, use this. And then the other things that were in the story, they would read and be like, I need to go draw that. And so they were illustrating this while I was writing chapters of it and reading it to them at night. And it was a really fun experience. So the goal will be to give that concept art to an artist, professional artist, who will then use that as inspiration for doing the graphic novel of this. So that's where that one came from. It's called Super Awesome Danger.
There's your title reveal.
Yes, the title reveal of the one that's not part of the Kickstarter is Super Awesome Danger. So I think we'll call it there. I need to figure out if I have a phone call. Thank you, guys. I really appreciate you, as I posted, putting up with me. Sorry about the stream problems. We'll see if we can figure out what was causing that. We'll be back in 1 week after the reveal on Thursday of Secret Project 1. We'll be posting those chapters of reading here on YouTube, and probably posting the text of the chapters also for those who want to just read the text. So thank you very much. We will see you in a week. Hello?
All right, are you excited for a food-adjacent heist?
Food adjacent.
Yes.
So it's not actual food they're stealing. It's stealing cutlery.
So what I have is an absolutely delightful story. This came in today on the little Google alert for someone who was committing a heist. This is actually from India.
Okay.
A city called Assam. Guy was in a house, breaking in, stealing all the jewelry and stuff. And then, on his way out, he stopped in the kitchen and he made himself some food.
Okay.
He made what's called, I'm going to pronounce this wrong, khichdi.
Okay.
It's like a porridge with like lentils and rice. And he just stopped and like made himself this big bowl of khichdi. Which I looked up the recipe, and it takes a long time to cook this because you need like a pressure cooker and all this stuff. So I don't know how long he was there, but that is what got him caught. Because the neighbors were like, hey, someone's moving around in the kitchen next door. I know nobody's there because they're out of town. And they called the police, and the police showed up, and they caught him eating his porridge. And so he's in jail now.
I wonder how often that happens.
Well,
Dude.
it has happened at least one other time. You want to hear this other one?
Okay.
It's not khichdi this time. This one was in the U.S. So there was a woman in Massachusetts who stole a truck. And let's see. Let me find the really good thing here. She stole a restoration company's truck. They were unloading materials from it. And she jumped in and took off. And
they
led
made the carpeting? What? This is a food heist.
No, well, we're getting there.
Okay.
She led the police on a 2-hour chase. And she was sideswiping other cars. She at one point backed up into a police cruiser. She dragged a cop for a while. Like it was a big, long ordeal. And after 2 hours of being chased by the police, she apparently got hungry because she went through a McDonald's drive-thru.
On a high-speed chase.
On a high-speed chase. And she ordered a bunch of chicken nuggets. And the cops are like, well, okay. Just pull in front of her then. And she was caught and she couldn't get out.
Did she pay for the chicken nuggets?
I don't know. It doesn't say.
Because that's my first question is, I mean.
Yeah, I have to assume that she was somehow mentally compromised, even if only temporarily, drunk or high or something, to think, I'm going to steal this truck for no reason. I'm going to run away from the cops with it, and then I'm going to stop and get some chicken nuggets.
I need a whole bunch of restoration supplies.
Yeah.
And some chicken nuggets.
And some chicken nuggets. So there you go. 2 thefts. I don't know if I'd call them heists. That were interrupted by food.
Yeah, I can imagine there's got to be someone who made themselves a sandwich while they were robbing the place, right?
Well, yeah.
And got caught.
And successfully got away with it.
Or, what was taken? You filed that on the police report. You're like, all right, we got my pocket watch, we got my laptop, we got 6 CDs, 2 slices of bread, my mom's
approximately 2
pastrami.
tablespoons of peanut butter.
Yeah. Do you list it? I mean...
Yeah, that's why you should always video the contents of your fridge every night before you go to sleep. Yeah, so goes to show that if you're going to commit a robbery, just steal food in the first place, rather than giving up on your other one and stealing food halfway through.
High-speed chases just don't seem to ever turn out well.
No.
That's that unless you're in a Fast and the Furious movie, that it seems like, you know what, roads make it so you have to go where the police can follow you and know the direction you're going to be going, and that just doesn't work real well.
Yeah.
It's not like the old days where you could rustle some horses and then just be off
and then just disappear into the wilderness. No, you're always like, well, he's on this road. He's still on this road. Yep.
I have a Brandon bad story idea for you.
Oh, I am excited about this.
We should call this podcast Bad Story Ideas.
Bad story ideas.
But
Brandon.
This one may not be that bad. In fact, I am maybe half to 60% expecting I'm going to say this idea, and you'll be like, oh yeah, this book series, this film series, this has been done.
Okay.
But I had the idea the other day that in a lot of zombie media, right? The thing that often is most horrific is when they show the little kid zombie, right?
Yeah.
Like it seems to happen in The Walking Dead. I didn't watch that show, but I know I've seen breakdowns of it and things like that.
It's the opening of Zombieland.
Yes.
Arguably my favorite part of the whole movie is the suburban mom trying to escape from the little girl princess zombie birthday party.
Right. And it occurred to me that is truly frightening, particularly if you're an adult. But if you're a kid, what might be truly frightening is if kids were immune to the zombie disease and they were the only ones.
Okay.
So the bad story idea is it's like Children of the Corn, right? It's this idea where zombie plague happens and it hits every adult. But for some reason, it doesn't hit you if you're 16 or under, or change your age depending on the genre. And it is a bunch of kids having to fight off their parents who are now zombies and the authority figures in their lives and everyone that they loved, with the impending sort of Logan's Run thought of, will this hit me when I get a little older? What is it about being a kid that stops it from hitting me?
So is this like the zombie plague is spread by biting, or just like in the air?
Yeah, I imagined it being in the air, like you wake up and
every adult
is a zombie.
Yeah.
Now after that, maybe it's like an initial spread, and after that it can be spread by biting. But I don't know. I like the idea in this thing of kids. The horror is not that I'm going to get bit and become a zombie. The horror is if I survive long enough, then I will be one.
Yeah.
And what do we do? What do you just do it right as it's happening? Watch the Lord of the Flies sort of society build where like, when you turn 17, we got to shoot you.
Yeah.
Because somewhere between 17 and 18, it can affect you. What do you do if you're a 12-year-old and you're hiding from your parents who are zombies?
What I love about this is the idea that we are taking senile dementia and just accelerating it.
Yep.
And we are having teenage kids who are afraid of the time that their mind is going to fail and they're going to lose control of themselves.
Right.
And not be able to remember their friends or their family.
I mean, you could do this less as traditional zombie tropes and just more monster tropes, right? You could do a Quiet Place type thing where you're hiding from the adults instead.
The adults. Now, I can't think of when this has been done with zombies, but there are several YA properties that have done this thing where, like, all adults die or something like that. And I can't for the life of me remember any of the names.
I mean, it is the classic question when you're making a middle grade or YA is, why aren't the adults solving this? And there are answers of varying amusement to me sometimes. And the answer doesn't always indicate whether the book's quality or not. Sometimes it's just like, we don't talk about why the adults aren't involved, and that's Harry Potter, right? It's just like, well, they don't.
Because they're not here. That was the number one biggest problem I had to solve writing the Zero G books was, why is it this kid who has to solve everything on his own? And, in book one, it's, well, everyone's asleep, and if we wake them up, they'll die when the ship accelerates. Book two was, well, because we've been blown out by a storm, and now we're too far away, and they can't find us. And so just coming up with reasons for them to have to deal with this on their own. I don't know. It feels to me, and I don't actually know if this is one of the reasons, but the YA market has changed dramatically over the last, let's say, 15 years.
Yeah.
And all of the stuff that it used to be dealing with. We went through the big, sci-fi dystopia phase. And today, YA is really predominantly kind of modern day teen problem novels, social issue novel.
Yeah,
that
lots
sort of
standalones,
stuff.
right?
Yeah, lots of standalones
With really cool
mostly
covers.
modern, that sort of thing. And I know some of that is because books like The Hate You Give were massively successful, right? This is what we saw with every other major YA book, is that when something is that successful, everyone is going to copy it. And so...
And everyone
part
was
of it is
burned
that.
out on dystopian.
Well, and yeah, I think people were not only burned out on dystopian, but burned out on the increasingly bizarre pretzels we would have to twist ourselves into
Yes.
to be like, well, this is why the adults are gone in this series. This is why the adults can't help in this series. And just kind of removing that, or...
Which, you know,
Yeah.
I don't know if this is definitely a part of my background, right, as a writer, because I've written several YA series, and a middle grade series, right? So, and in each of them, including The Arithmetist, the adults are there and helping, right? Like, I don't write the adults aren't there. I just write, hey, kid, you're on the cusp of being an adult. Join the adventure. We're all here. And this happens to be your story, which feels more like an epic fantasy, my epic fantasy background influencing me.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's might be part of why, like, I live in this space where I write YA, but I'm really an epic fantasy sci-fi writer who occasionally have books that slot into that genre well. And I think that might be, I hadn't even thought of it till now, that putting my thumb on it, it's really just... the adults are always involved.
Yeah. Well, and I think that there's a lot of room for that. It felt, I mean, it was massively popular for a long time, but these, trying to create adult problems that kids have to solve through adult means is
Right.
really what YA became for a while. And so when I did Partials and The Mirador, both of my YA series, basically were, these are adult problems that adults should be solving, and in fact are. These dumb kids are going to go off and try to do it their own way. So it's not that the adults can't help, it's that the
Right.
kids are like, you don't know how to do this right. I am going to do something inadvisable and highly illegal to try to solve it on my own. Which, again, I didn't do that on purpose. That's just how I explained
Is that Dan, the parents' influence?
I don't know. When I started Mirador, I went out of my way because that is about a Mexican-American family. And, I used to live in Mexico with a lot of Mexican families. They're big. I wanted to kind of show that idea of multiple generations under one roof, big extended family all working together. And so I kind of went out of my way to make her family overbearing and kind of domineering in a way that she wants to go off and have adventures, but she has to go work with her parents in the family business, and she has to do all these other things. And her dad's always bugging her and texting her to ask where she is and things like that. And she has her little sisters and her brothers and everything, her grandma, which was a way of keeping the family present, and not necessarily as an antagonist, but it definitely came from the fact that I had teenagers at that point. And thought, well, let's do this. Let's tell, a great big family where the adults are all there and you can't get away from them.
I mentioned it earlier. Is it me or the cover's just gotten really good in YA lately? I really like a lot of these covers I'm seeing.
I feel like that is across the board in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of books that have come out lately that I have thought. One we've talked about on the show before, She Who Rides the Storm by Caitlin Sangster. That cover's gorgeous.
Yeah.
And yeah, like for a and I think it's more visible in YA because for such a long time YA had basically 3 flavors of cover. There was super close up on a white girl's face. There was weird iconic image of like a flower or a shape. You know, the Twilight series had these, the Wings series had these. And then there was silhouette of a teenage girl, maybe in a dress or maybe in very tight pants, usually looking over her shoulder so you can see her butt. Like, that was all you got in YA for like 7 solid years. And so now that they're branching out of that, I think it's more noticeable of, hey, this is a really interesting cover.
When was the pretty dresses phase? Because I remember there being a year or two with pretty dresses.
I want to say Pretty Dresses was like 2013, 2014, like Matched and The Selection. And we had a big period of time where YA was all about weird science fictional societies that forced teenage girls to dress up in pretty dresses and, you know, fall in love with handsome people.
And occasionally kill people.
And occasionally kill people as necessary.
Would you, as a, like, you, I would consider, like, a straight-up YA author. You've written adult, but, like, I'm a sci-fi fantasy author who pretends to be YA now and then. You're, like, connected to the community. You follow the trends. You know all these things. What did sort of...
I haven't really been deep into YA in a while.
Okay. Because you've been doing middle grade and other things.
Yeah.
What did you feel like watching the whole dystopian thing? Because I remember like just being in book selling when the Hunger Games took off, and watching kind of from the outside, really interested as this became the next big thing. Because everyone was wanting the next big thing after Twilight, and they found it. But then after dystopian, everybody wanted the next big thing again, and no one was able to find it. Right? It's just been there was until this kind of problem novel thing happened. For a long time, I don't know if you went to some of these things, people would be like, all right, the next big thing is angels. Everyone write an angel book.
Yeah, I think people got really hung up on, vampires as, well, clearly what our audience wants is supernatural creatures, but a different kind of supernatural creature, which... No, I don't think that's what it was. And some people did have big success with that. You know, April Lynn Pike in The Wings, she went with fairies. And there were people who did it with angels or people who did it with whatever, which I think in hindsight was just the long tail of the same trend of we're going to have paranormal romances with funky monsters.
I've said many times that when Hunger Games took off, I just did a head smack, right? Because I'm like, of course... dystopian, big budget dystopian epics would be a huge thing to take off in YA. Why didn't I see that? Yeah. They've been a part of science fiction forever, but what people didn't put together with them was that sort of Titanic feeling, right?
Yeah.
Like a lot of the dystopian in science fiction was not targeted mass market, so to speak. It was targeted at be afraid of this one weird thing that's probably going to happen in the future when there's no more housing and everyone's immortal, and so you're all going to be living with your grandpa who's going to get you all convicted and thrown in prison so he can have one room to himself. It's this sort of thing. It's the 1984 high concept. What it wasn't was Star Wars. But dystopian.
Well,
right?
and
With
what
teens.
that really was I think the move to YA is what made everything click. Because when we were growing up, dystopia was that. It was 1984. It was Animal
we
Farm.
had The
was,
Giver, right? But
Yeah,
The Giver's
but The Giver
much
was
more
still,
1984.
It was still this idea of everything sucks and it's always going to be bad.
Yeah.
And the new wave that started with, even before Hunger Games, I would say it started with Uglies, was everything sucks, but we're going to burn it down.
Yeah.
And that became the key that finally made dystopia take off was, look, we can change it. We can make it better. And in that sense, I find dystopia to actually be an incredibly hopeful genre.
Right.
And, when the Hunger Games movies were coming out, there was this hue and cry about, look at, all the violence that's on screen and these dismal stories. Why are teens so depressed all the time? Really, when you take something like Hunger Games and compare it to something like Iron Man, which was coming out at the same time, Iron Man is about maintaining the status quo. the world sucks, but I'm going to keep it the way it is. And Hunger Games says, the world sucks, we're going to change it. We're going to make it better. And in that sense, I think it is like qualitatively different.
Okay, I'm going to quibble with you about
Okay.
that. I think you are leaning too hard. Like, what is Iron Man about? It's about a person realizing his life has been crap and he needs to be a better person.
Yes.
Right.
But superheroes as a genre,
Right.
they're not out to change the world. They're out to maintain the status quo.
They're out to protect and save the world. They're not, like, I think you are trying too hard.
No.
Yeah.
Spider-Man, he's the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. He's
Right.
protecting and saving people.
Yep.
He is not doing anything about systemic problems.
No.
Whereas something like Hunger
Yeah.
Games is fundamentally about changing systemic issues.
Yeah, but neither is Jane Austen, and you're not saying that about Jane Austen, right? Most stories are not about changing systemic issues. They're about a person's life and the life that they're living in that. Like, pointing at a superhero story that is trying to do something fundamentally different and saying it's about maintaining the status quo, I think is reductive. I think it's stretching to make a point.
Okay. Maybe it is. But I think when you're talking about the wave of YA dystopia,
Yes.
which was specifically about burning the old system down
Right.
so we can build a new world, I think it's still a fair comparison.
I think you can say dystopian was about that.
And
With-
other things were not.
Without stomping down other
Without
things.
stomping down other things. I
Right.
enjoy stomping down some things.
I think you can do that without saying people who enjoy superhero movies are all about maintaining the status quo.
If you like superheroes, you're a fascist. That's not what I'm saying,
Mm-hmm.
but it definitely sounded like what I was saying. I suppose in that sense, it makes a lot
Mm-hmm.
of sense. From that perspective of the YA dystopia thing was really about kids looking at a flawed system and trying to change it.
Yes.
In that sense, it follows perfectly that stuff like The Hate You Give was the next big trend. Let's take all of this social angst that we have and take it out of the speculative and bring it into the modern world and have them dealing with real issues instead of, which commando unit do you have to join based on your personality quiz.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree with that. Yeah, there is, we're sci-fi fantasy people, right? There is something about the sci-fi fantasy aspects to it that I love, but man, it got so old, the dystopian thing.
It did.
It got so old real fast. We've talked before on this about an excellent book, Unwind, that uses just the most crazy premise. And that, like I said, it's a really good book. But these premises were just thrown around right and left.
Yeah.
I can't help but remember the time I went on a sales call. Did you ever do this? When I was brand new, I had asked Tor's salesman in Utah if I could go with him for a day.
I never
on
did
his
that.
sales
no.
calls, just to see how books are actually sold. And I remember him being at Sam Weller, back when it was called that, up in Salt Lake. I went with him into the back room, and he opened up the catalog, and I don't know if it was right or wrong, not making any judgment calls, but he opened up, and he started pitching some of the books, and then he got to the paranormal romance, not the YA, just regularly, and his description was, he's a werewolf, she's an accountant. How many do you want? Okay. He's a bugbear. You can say that, but
Yeah.
He's this, she's this. She's a vampire, he's an angel. How many do you want? And that it was a one sentence of that, and I can't help but think of the dystopian thing being pitched as, okay, this time they are selected into groups because of beard lengths.
Yeah.
This time it's
Or, what is illegal in this society? This one, you're not allowed to fall in love. This one, you're not allowed to have your own thoughts. This one, you're not allowed to whatever.
Yeah, and that's not to belittle. I'm sure some of these books are really good, but I can feel the whole genre toppling under the weight of keeping these premises straight and also
Yeah.
feeling like they were, So why haven't other genres had that same implosion, right? Like you could make that same argument about epic fantasy. He finds a magic sword. Oh, he finds a magic ring. Oh, he finds a, right? Like you could go down the line with that and do the same thing.
And you're right that hasn't ever, been the thing. And I wonder if part of it is because people are looking for different things in epic fantasy than they are in YA dystopia. I wonder if it's maybe just the audience. YA really took off as a genre. It's been around forever.
Yes.
We have to make that caveat, obviously. But it didn't become its own thing. It wasn't even its own section in the bookstore, for the most part, until Harry Potter and Twilight and that sort of stuff.
Right.
And part of what came with that, part of what happened at the same time, was the blockbuster mentality, which hit YA harder than anything else, partly because of stuff like Harry Potter and Twilight.
Right.
The idea that this is a massive book, we're going to camp out at the bookstore on opening night with a line around the corner. That never happened before.
No, and beyond that, if I can kind of add something to this, the rise of the big box stores, moving into Costco's, beyond that, also fueled this. When the Costco phenomenon is an interesting one, in that they carry books and they sell a ton of books. They carry very limited titles. So if you are one of the books that's getting carried by your Costco's and your Sam's Clubs, then your sales just skyrocket. And if you're not, then you just don't sell to those people. Because those are the people that are like, I'm going to buy what's at Costco because it's easy, it's convenient, and things like that, which really fueled this blockbuster mentality, which was the Harry Potter. It aligned with it, and it was the same sort of thing.
Yeah, and so YA has taken this blockbuster mentality, and so it's less about you read what you want to read and more about you read what everyone else is reading.
Yeah.
And there's some really big upsides to that. We have lost the kind of water cooler, did you see this show last night thing that you and I grew up with. We get that occasionally. Each time a new Game of Thrones episode would come out, everyone would talk about it. I remember
that's long ago now. You have to, now it's what thing did we binge for a week? And then
and books have been able to fill a big part of that niche.
Yeah.
Because of this blockbuster thing. Everyone at school is reading, Percy Jackson. So I'm going to read Percy Jackson so that I can join in the conversation or so that I can play it on the playground or whatever. And so part of that I think is cool because it's encouraging reading.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I do think that it has formed these unnatural tidal waves of, well, everything now has to be a magical boarding school. Everything has to be a paranormal romance. Everything has to be a YA dystopia.
Do you think trends move faster in YA than in adult?
Yeah. One of the interesting things about the YA market, the demographic, in my experience, is that there's very little author or even series loyalty.